The antiseptic scent of the clinic prickled Su Yueming's nose, a stark contrast to the metallic tang of fear that coated her tongue. She clutched the thin, crisp sheet of paper, the black ink of the printed figures blurring as a wave of nausea washed over her. 380,000. The number echoed in her mind, a deafening clang against the fragile walls of her composure. "You said I was pregnant for a month," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the rhythmic hum of the air conditioner. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and a reassuring smile that felt jarringly out of place, nodded. "Yes, about 4 weeks. This is the cost breakdown for the comprehensive prenatal care package." Yueming traced the lines of the itemized list with a trembling finger. Each medical term, each projected cost, felt like a stone piling onto the crushing weight in her chest. 380,000. It was a sum that could cripple her already strained finances. She'd barely managed to scrape together enough for the initial consultation, let alone this exorbitant figure. A bitter laugh threatened to escape her lips. This child, this unexpected miracle, was rapidly transforming into a financial nightmare. Can I get a discount?" she asked, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Shame burned hot in her cheeks. She, a Gu Corporation intern, haggling over the price of her unborn child's well-being. The irony was a cruel twist of the knife. The doctor's smile softened, a hint of pity flickering in her eyes. Before she could respond, a crisp, efficient voice cut through the sterile air. "Your fee has been paid, Ms. Su." Yueming's head snapped up, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. A young nurse stood by the door, a tablet clutched in her hand. Her expression was neutral, professional, yet Yueming sensed a subtle undercurrent of something. Curiosity. Perhaps even a touch of awe. "Paid?" Yueming echoed, her voice laced with disbelief. Who would pay such a sum for her? Her mind raced, sifting through the limited possibilities. Her parents? Impossible. They were struggling themselves. A distant relative? Even more unlikely. A cold dread began to seep into her bones, wrapping around her like icy tendrils. Could it be him? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. The enigmatic, powerful man who had swept into her life like a whirlwind, leaving her pregnant and alone, a ghost of a memory. Gu Jingxing. The mere thought of his name sent a complex cocktail of emotions surging through her. Resentment, fear, a strange, undeniable flicker of longing. She pushed the thought away, burying it deep beneath layers of anxiety. This couldn't be his doing. He didn't even know about the baby. Did he? Stepping out of the clinic into the blinding sunlight, Yueming felt a strange disconnect from the world around her. The city's usual cacophony, the honking of cars, the chatter of pedestrians seemed muffled, distant, as though she were observing it from behind a thick pane of glass. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts, each one swirling around the central, inescapable question: who had paid? And why? Returning to Gu Corporation, the imposing glass and steel structure felt more oppressive than ever. Each step she took echoed in the cavernous lobby, amplifying the sense of unease that gnawed at her. As she reached her desk on the design floor, she found Director Ma hovering nearby, her thin lips pursed in a disapproving frown. "Late again, Ms. Su." Ma's voice dripped with saccharine condescension. Yueming forced a tight smile, her stomach churning. "I had a doctor's appointment." Ma's eyes narrowed, her gaze lingering on Yueming's midsection. "A doctor's appointment? Is that so? Perhaps you should focus more on your work and less on other pursuits." The thinly veiled insinuation hung in the air, thick with malice. Yueming's jaw clenched, her fingers curling into fists beneath her desk. She wanted to lash out, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. What could she say? That she was pregnant? That the father was the elusive CEO, Gu Jingxing, a man who seemed to exist in a different stratosphere altogether. The thought alone was enough to send a fresh wave of nausea rolling through her. Later that afternoon, a summons arrived. Mr. Gu's office. Yuemeng's heart hammered against her ribs as she made her way to the top floor, the elevator's smooth ascent mirroring the rising tide of dread within her. Standing before the imposing mahogany doors of his office, she hesitated, her hand hovering over the cool metal of the handle. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The spacious office was bathed in the warm glow of the late afternoon sun, the panoramic view of the city sprawling out below like a glittering tapestry. Gu Jingxing sat behind his massive desk, his back to her, seemingly absorbed in the documents before him. He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her presence. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken tension. Yuemeng shifted uneasily, her gaze flitting around the room, searching for some clue, some indication of what was to come. Finally, he spoke, his voice a low, resonant rumble that sent shivers down her spine. "You went to the clinic today." It wasn't a question. Yuemeng's breath hitched in her throat. He knew. But how? Yes, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. He swiveled in his chair, his piercing gaze finally locking with hers. The intensity of his stare was overwhelming, stripping away her carefully constructed defenses, leaving her feeling exposed, vulnerable. "The child, is it mine?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Yuemeng's mind reeled. He was asking. He actually wanted to know. A strange mix of relief and trepidation washed over her. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Before she could find her voice, a commotion erupted outside the office. The door burst open, revealing a distraught Mr. Zhou, his face etched with worry. "Jingxing," he exclaimed, his voice laced with urgency. "I found her. I found my Meng Meng." He rushed towards Yuemeng, his eyes shining with tears. He reached out, his trembling hands cupping her face. "My granddaughter, I thought I'd lost you forever." Yuemeng stared at him, her mind struggling to process the sudden, unexpected turn of events. "Grandfather?" Gu Jingxing rose from his chair, his expression unreadable. "Grandfather," he echoed, his gaze shifting between Mr. Zhou and Yuemeng. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, forming a picture that was both shocking and strangely beautiful. The events that followed unfolded in a dizzying rush. The revelation of Yuemeng's true identity, the public acknowledgement of their marriage, the swift and decisive dismantling of Director Ma's carefully constructed web of lies. It was a whirlwind of change, a seismic shift in the dynamics of the Gu Corporation, and in Yuemeng's own life. Standing beside Gu Jingxing, his hand firmly clasped in hers, she looked out at the assembled employees, their faces a mixture of shock, awe, and grudging respect. A small, hesitant smile touched her lips. She was no longer just a pregnant intern, a target of gossip and speculation. She was Su Yuemeng, Mr. Gu's wife, heiress to the Zhou fortune, and the future mother of his child. The future, once a daunting expanse of uncertainty, now stretched before her, filled with the promise of a new beginning. Sunlight, filtered through the gauzy curtains, painted stripes across the unfamiliar room. Su Yuemeng's head throbbed, a dull echo of a forgotten dream. Disorientation clung to her like a damp shroud, heavier than the silk sheets draped over her body. Where was she? This wasn't her modest apartment, not the worn floral wallpaper she'd grown accustomed to. This room breathed luxury, from the polished mahogany furniture to the faint, lingering scent of sandalwood. Panic, a cold hand, squeezed her chest. Her eyes darted around, searching for a familiar landmark, a clue. Then she saw him. A man. His back to her, standing by the French windows, his silhouette stark against the morning light. Fear, sharp and immediate, pierced the haze of confusion. Who are you?" Her voice was a dry rasp, barely audible. He turned, and the world tilted on its axis. Gu Jingxing. Mr. Gu. Her enigmatic boss. Here. In her room. Her mind, still sluggish from the unknown, scrambled for an explanation. Had she dreamt this? A feverish hallucination brought on by stress? The accusations of Director Ma, the oily insinuations of Vice President Wei, the weight of the past few days threatened to crush her. Why is there a man in my room?" The words tumbled out, laced with a tremor she couldn't suppress. He took a step closer, his expression unreadable. "You don't remember?" His voice, usually clipped and authoritative in the office, held a strange gentleness. "Remember? Remember what?" Fragments of the previous evening flickered through her mind: the forced company dinner, Vice President Wei's insistent offer of a drink, the sickeningly sweet taste, the room spinning. Her breath hitched. Tu was drugged. The realization was a sickening blow to her stomach. The vulnerability, the violation, washed over her in a wave of nausea. Bibi Vice President Wei. Gu Jingxing's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath his cheekbone. He moved swiftly, crossing the room to sit on the edge of the bed. Close enough that she could see the faint lines of fatigue around his eyes, a stark contrast to his usual impeccable composure. He tried to, she couldn't bring herself to say the words, the implication hanging heavy in the air. He reached out, his hand hovering just above hers. Hesitantly, almost involuntarily, she reached back, her fingers brushing against his. The contact, surprisingly warm and grounding, sent a shiver down her spine. "He didn't touch you," Gu Jingxing said, his voice low and reassuring. "I arrived in time." Relief, potent and overwhelming, flooded through her. But then, a fresh wave of confusion crashed over her. How? Why was he there? What did it all mean? She searched his face, looking for answers in the depths of his dark eyes. He averted his gaze, a flicker of something unidentifiable crossing his features. "Tu will be responsible for you." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Responsible? The word echoed in her mind, stirring up a maelstrom of emotions. Was this pity? A sense of obligation? Or something else entirely? She wanted to ask, to demand an explanation, but her throat felt tight, the words caught somewhere between her heart and her lips. He stood up, breaking the fragile connection. "Rest," he said, turning back towards the window. "We'll talk later." He paused, his shoulders stiff. "Tu have some things to take care of." He walked out, leaving her alone with the echoes of his words and a growing sense of unease. The silence that followed his departure was deafening. Su Yuemeng sat on the bed, the luxurious sheet suddenly feeling like a cage. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of memory, the disjointed puzzle pieces of the past few months. The secret of late-night phone calls. The hushed whispers. The way he sometimes looked at her in the office, a fleeting expression of what? Concern. Recognition. Something more. And then, a memory surfaced, clear and sharp as a shard of glass. The night of the company gala. The hidden alcove. His hand on her back, warm and reassuring. His lips brushing against her ear, whispering, "I'll find you, Meng Meng." Meng Meng. Her childhood nickname. A name no one at Gu Corporation knew. A gasp escaped her lips. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Gu Jingxing. Mr. Gu. The enigmatic CEO. He wasn't just her boss. He was her husband. A husband she'd barely seen in the 2 years since their whirlwind courtship and secret marriage. A marriage orchestrated by her grandfather, Mr. Zhou, a powerful figure who believed Gu Jingxing to be the only man capable of protecting his granddaughter. A marriage she'd agreed to, driven by a complex mix of duty and a strange, undeniable attraction to the man she barely knew. A marriage that had remained a secret, a carefully guarded truth, until this moment. The tears came then, hot and silent, streaming down her face. Relief mingled with confusion, gratitude with resentment. Why hadn't he told her? Why maintain the charade? Why allow her to endure the whispers, the accusations, the fear? She clutched the sheets, her knuckles white, the silk a cool contrast to the burning shame that crawled up her throat. She was his wife, and yet she'd been treated like a common mistress. The thought stung, a bitter aftertaste to the overwhelming relief of knowing she was safe. She closed her eyes, the image of Gu Jingxing's face burned into her mind. The lines of fatigue, the flicker of vulnerability, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. She had so many questions, so many unanswered questions. But for now, she needed to rest. She needed to gather her strength, to prepare for the storm she knew was coming. Because the revelation of her true relationship with Gu Jingxing wouldn't just clear her name. It would change everything. The muted hum of the air conditioning barely registered over the pounding in Su Yuemeng's ears. Director Ma's office, sleek and modern, felt like a glass cage. Sunlight streamed through the panoramic window overlooking the city, a stark contrast to the chilling air that permeated the room. The chrome and glass reflected the cityscape, creating an illusion of depth, a mirage of escape that Yuemeng desperately craved. She clutched her portfolio tighter, the smooth leather a small comfort against the clammy skin of her palms. Just get through this, she told herself, her internal voice thin and reedy with anxiety. The faint floral scent of Director Ma's perfume, something expensive and alien, mingled with the metallic tang of fear that coated Yuemeng's tongue. Director Ma, perched behind her expansive desk like a predatory bird, regarded Yuemeng with a thin, unsettling smile. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, held a glint of something that Yuemeng couldn't quite decipher, something beyond mere professional scrutiny. "So, Miss Su," Director Ma began, her voice smooth as polished stone, "tell me why you believe you're a suitable candidate for our design team." Yuemeng swallowed, the lump in her throat stubbornly refusing to budge. She'd rehearsed this answer countless times, but the words felt hollow, meaningless under Ma's intense gaze. "I believe my portfolio speaks for itself," she managed, her voice betraying a tremor she desperately tried to conceal. Why is she looking at me like that? She wondered, her unease escalating with each passing second. It's like she knows Director Ma's smile widened, a predatory curve that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Indeed, it does," she said, her tone laced with a subtle, chilling irony. She tapped a manicured finger against a specific page in Yuemeng's portfolio, a design Yuemeng was particularly proud of. A design that had won her accolades in a prestigious competition years ago. "This piece, for instance, is strikingly familiar." Yuemeng's heart lurched. She knew that design. Knew the subtle nuances, the intricate details that only the original creator would recognize. "Yes, she began, but Director Ma cut her off. "It's remarkably similar to a piece that was disqualified from the national design competition 5 years ago for plagiarism." Director Ma's voice was soft, almost gentle, but the words landed like a blow to the gut. Yuemeng's breath hitched. Disqualified? Plagiarism? The accusations were absurd, ludicrous. "That's impossible," she whispered, her mind racing, trying to grasp the implications of Ma's words. "She's lying." The thought struck her with the force of a physical blow. "She knows I'm the original designer. She's doing this deliberately." Director Ma leaned back in her chair, the movement almost languid, as if she were enjoying Yuemeng's distress. "Impossible," she echoed, raising a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I assure you, Miss Su, I have a very good memory. I was one of the judges that year. A wave of nausea washed over Yue Meng. The floral scent of Ma's perfume turned cloying, suffocating. The pieces clicked into place. Ma knew. She had recognized Yue Meng's work, recognized her talent, and was now using it against her. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. This wasn't about her qualifications, her pregnancy, or even the whispers circulating about her and Mr. Gu. This was personal. This was revenge. Yue Meng's voice was barely a whisper, choked with a mixture of disbelief and anger. You knew it was me. Director Ma's smile finally reached her eyes, a cold, triumphant gleam. Of course, I knew, she purred, her voice dripping with a malicious satisfaction. I've been waiting for this moment, Miss Su. Waiting to see the look on your face when you realized you'd walked right into my trap. The air in the room crackled with tension. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the faint hum of the air conditioning and the rapid beat of Yue Meng's heart. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a butterfly pinned beneath a magnifying glass. She wanted to scream, to rage, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. You can go now, Director Ma said, her voice dismissive, almost bored. The casual cruelty of her words was a final, devastating blow. Yue Meng's mind reeled. Why, she managed to choke out, the single word laden with the weight of her confusion and despair. Why didn't you read my resume carefully? Why go through this charade? Director Ma chuckled, a low, throaty sound that sent a shiver down Yue Meng's spine. Because, Miss Su, she said, her eyes glittering with a cold fire, you don't deserve to be in the story. You had your chance, and you threw it away. Now, it's my turn. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history, with a bitterness that transcended the professional realm. Yue Meng finally understood. This wasn't just about a design competition. This was about something deeper, something buried in the past. Something that Director Ma had been nurturing, a seed of resentment that had blossomed into this venomous act of revenge. Yue Meng gathered her portfolio, her hands trembling. The smooth leather offered no comfort now, only a reminder of the humiliation she had just endured. She met Director Ma's gaze, her own eyes burning with a newfound resolve. You're wrong, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. This isn't my story. It's ours. And I'm not going anywhere. She turned and walked out, the click of her heels against the polished floor echoing in the suddenly silent office. The cityscape reflected in the glass no longer seemed like a mirage. It was a battlefield, and she was ready to fight. The fluorescent lights of the Gu Corporation interview room hummed, a dull counterpoint to the frantic rhythm of Su Yue Meng's heart. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, were slick with a nervous sweat. Across the polished table, the HR director, a woman with a severe bun and an even severer expression, tapped a pen against Su Yue Meng's resume. In turn, the words seemed to mock her from the page. In turn, with a secret growing beneath her simple maternity dress. A secret that felt heavy, burdensome, and yet a flicker of fierce protectiveness ignited within her. This was her child, her and his. So, Miss Su, the HR director's voice was crisp, devoid of warmth. Your qualifications are adequate. However, your lack of experience in a corporate setting is a concern. Yue Meng swallowed, the dryness in her throat making it difficult. I understand, but I'm a fast learner. I'm willing to put in the extra effort. Please, she pleaded silently, I need this. This wasn't just about pride, it was about proving something to herself. To him. Even if he didn't know. Effort is commendable, Miss Su, but this is Gu Corporation. We have high standards. The director's gaze lingered on Yue Meng's slightly swollen belly, a subtle but pointed look that made her stomach clench. Shame, hot and unwelcome, crept up her neck. Before Yue Meng could respond, the door to the interview room opened silently. A figure stood framed in the doorway, the afternoon sunlight momentarily haloing him, making him seem larger than life. Gu Jingxing. Her husband. A word that still felt foreign on her tongue, a word that carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken emotions. He hadn't contacted her since that night. A night etched into her memory, a whirlwind of emotions she barely understood. Seeing him now, so unexpectedly, a complex cocktail of fear, longing, and resentment flooded her veins. He didn't speak, just stood there, his expression unreadable. The HR director, however, instantly transformed. The stern mask melted away, replaced by an obsequious smile. Mr. Gu. To what do we owe this pleasure? He gave a curt nod, his gaze finally settling on Yuemeng. Her breath caught in her throat. His eyes, dark and inscrutable, seemed to pierce through her, reading her unspoken anxieties, her carefully guarded secret. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a flicker of recognition. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving her more uncertain than ever. "What's the status of this candidate?" he asked, his voice low and resonant, filling the small room. The HR director stammered, "We were just concluding the interview, sir." "Miss Su's qualifications, get him on board," Gu Jingxing interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. The HR director blinked, clearly taken aback. "Sir. I said, hire her. As my assistant." He turned to leave, then paused, glancing back at the bewildered HR director. Stories don't need HR without vision. The door closed softly behind him, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Yuemeng sat frozen, her mind reeling. He had hired her. His assistant. Why? Was it recognition? Pity? Or just a cruel twist of fate? The HR director, still recovering from the shock, cleared her throat. "Well, Miss Su. It seems you've landed the position. Consider yourself fortunate." The word dripped with unspoken resentment. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Whispers followed Yuemeng like shadows. "Did you hear? The intern Mr. Gu's assistant now. Pregnant, and now a personal assistant. Must be nice to know the right people." Director Ma, her face a mask of barely concealed fury, cornered Yuemeng by the coffee machine. "So, the rumors are true. You're quite the climber, aren't you?" Yuemeng's hands clenched, the injustice of it all burning in her chest. "I got the job on my own merit," she retorted, her voice trembling slightly. Director Ma's lips curled into a sneer. "Merit? Don't insult my intelligence. You think anyone believes that?" Yuemeng wanted to scream, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. What could she say? The truth was too unbelievable, too complicated. She turned and fled, the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. Later, in a quiet corner of the office, Vice President Wei approached her, his smile oily and insincere. "Congratulations, Miss Su. A remarkable achievement. Mr. Gu clearly sees something special in you." His gaze lingered on her belly, making her skin crawl. "Perhaps I can offer you some guidance on how to navigate the intricacies of this corporation." Yuemeng recoiled. "Thank you, Vice President Wei, but I'm sure I'll manage." She turned away, her heart pounding. The whispers, the stares, the veiled accusations, it was suffocating. She longed for the anonymity of the intern program, for the simplicity of a life before him. In the grand, opulent office of Mr. Zhou, the retired chairman of the board, a different kind of conversation was taking place. "He does not meet the requirements," Mr. Zhou's voice was firm, his eyes fixed on the report in front of him. "Already lost the election." He was reviewing potential candidates to fill a crucial leadership position, his disappointment palpable. His assistant hesitated. Sir, there's another matter. Regarding Miss Su Yuemeng, the new assistant to Mr. Gu, Mr. Zhou's brow furrowed. What about her? The assistant leaned closer, lowering his voice. There are rumors concerning her relationship with Mr. Gu. And her pregnancy. Mr. Zhou's hand froze. A strange premonition washed over him. Her name, you said, Su Yuemeng? The assistant nodded. Yes, sir. Mr. Zhou closed his eyes, a memory, long buried, surfacing. A photograph, a little girl with bright, curious eyes, his granddaughter, lost so many years ago. He opened his eyes, his gaze sharp and focused. Get me her file. Everything. His voice held a tremor of something akin to hope, a flicker of light in the darkness that had shrouded him for so long. The pieces were starting to fall into place, a puzzle he hadn't even realized he was trying to solve. The air in Vice President Wei's office was thick with the cloying scent of lilies, a fragrance Su Yuemeng usually found pleasant, but today, it felt suffocating. Sunlight streamed through the panoramic window, casting a harsh glare across the plush, cream-colored carpet, a stark contrast to the shadows gathering in the pit of her stomach. Her hand, resting protectively over her slightly swollen abdomen, tightened involuntarily. She'd rehearsed this meeting countless times in her head, each iteration ending with a triumphant securing of a permanent position. Now, facing the vice president's oily smile, the carefully constructed scenarios crumbled like dry leaves. He gestured towards the luxurious leather chair opposite his imposing mahogany desk. Have a seat, Miss Su. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. He knows, a chilling voice whispered in her mind. He knows about the baby. It was absurd, of course. No one knew, not even Mr. Gu himself. Yet, the vice president's gaze lingered a fraction too long on her midsection, fueling her paranoia. She perched on the edge of the chair, the leather cool against her skin, a stark contrast to the rising heat in her cheeks. Your designs for the Urban Oasis project are quite innovative, Vice President Wei began, his voice smooth as silk. A fresh perspective, exactly what Gu Corporation needs. Yuemeng forced a smile, the muscles in her face stiff. Is this it? The offer. A flicker of hope ignited within her, fragile but persistent. Thank you, Vice President Wei. I've put a lot of effort into this project. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Effort is commendable, Miss Su. But in this world, effort alone isn't always enough. His eyes, small and beady, held a glint that sent a shiver down her spine. Sometimes, it requires other forms of persuasion. The lilies suddenly smelled putrid. Yuemeng's breath hitched. The carefully constructed walls of professionalism she built around herself began to crumble, brick by agonizing brick. The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air, suffocating her with its weight. I'm not sure I understand, Vice President Wei. Her voice was barely a whisper, a stark contrast to the inner turmoil raging within her. He chuckled, a low, guttural sound that scraped against her nerves. Let me be frank, Miss Su. If you want to become a regular employee, you have to take care of me, the vice president, first. The blood drained from her face, leaving her feeling cold and clammy. This is it, she thought, a wave of nausea washing over her. This is the price. The casual cruelty of his words, the blatant disregard for her dignity, struck her with the force of a physical blow. Her hand instinctively went to her stomach again, a protective gesture against the ugliness unfolding before her. She thought of the tiny life growing inside her, the future she dreamed of, a future that seemed to be slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. I've earned my position through my work, she stammered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and indignation. My designs speak for themselves. A desperate plea for fairness echoed in her mind, even as she knew it was falling on deaf ears. Don't be naive, Miss Sue, he sneered, his mask of civility slipping. Talent is cheap. Loyalty is much more valuable. He rose from his chair, his imposing figure looming over her. Think about it. A permanent position, a significant salary increase, all within your grasp. He paused, his gaze lingering on her again. Unless, of course, you prefer to remain an intern indefinitely. Panic clawed at her throat. She could feel the trap closing in, the suffocating weight of his power bearing down on her. What do I do? She thought frantically. What can I do? A single image flashed through her mind, Gu Jingxing's face, impassive, enigmatic. A desperate gamble formed in her mind, a risky maneuver born of fear and desperation. You shouldn't underestimate my relationship with Mr. Gu, she blurted out, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. It's a lie, a voice screamed in her head. He doesn't even know about the baby, let alone our marriage. Vice President Wei's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He laughed, a short, sharp bark. Don't use Mr. Gu to scare me. He barely knows you exist. I've been with Gu Corporation for over 10 years. I know how things work around here. His confidence, his unshakable belief in his own power, sent a fresh wave of fear through her. Yu Emeng's mind raced. This was it. The point of no return. She could back down, swallow her pride, and play his game. Or she could double down on her bluff, a desperate gamble with potentially devastating consequences. She closed her eyes for a fleeting moment, gathering her courage, drawing strength from the silent promise she'd made to the life growing within her. When she opened them again, a flicker of defiance sparked in their depths. You're wrong, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. He knows me. Better than you think. A flicker of uncertainty crossed the vice president's face, a fleeting crack in his carefully constructed facade. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could utter a word, a sharp knock echoed through the room. The door swung open, revealing Mr. Zhou, his face etched with concern. He looked directly at Yu Emeng, his eyes filled with a warmth that surprised her. Yu Emeng, are you all right? I heard voices. Is this man bothering you? Yu Emeng's mind reeled. Mr. Zhou. Here. Why? The sudden shift in the power dynamic, the unexpected appearance of this influential figure, left her speechless. Vice President Wei, his face now ashen, stammered, Mr. Zhou. I was just discussing Miss Sue's performance. Mr. Zhou's gaze turned to the Vice President, his expression hardening. Miss Sue is family. I suggest you treat her accordingly. The weight of his words, the quiet authority in his voice, left no room for argument. The Vice President, his face now a mask of fear and confusion, could only manage a week, of course, Mr. Zhou. He looked at Yu Emeng, his eyes wide with a dawning realization. The arrogant smirk had vanished, replaced by a look of stark terror. Yu Emeng, still reeling from the rapid turn of events, could only watch in stunned silence as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, the true nature of her connection to Mr. Zhou, and by extension, to Mr. Gu, about to be revealed in the stark light of day. The scent of lilies, no longer cloying, seemed to carry a hint of something else, something akin to victory. The fluorescent lights of Gu Corporation hummed, a monotonous drone against the hushed whispers and clicking keyboards. Yu Emeng, clutching a stack of design drafts, felt a creeping unease. The whispers seemed sharper, the glances more pointed. Director Ma's earlier words, laced with venom, echoed in her ears, in turn, don't think you can fly high just because. She swallowed hard, the bile rising in her throat. Just because. The unspoken accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Just because she was pregnant. Just because rumors swirled around her like gnats, linking her to Mr. Gu in ways she couldn't fathom. The weight of the unborn child pressed against her, a constant reminder of the secret she carried, the secret that seemed to be unraveling thread by thread. She reached her desk, the cheap particle board cold against her fingertips. As she settled into the uncomfortable chair, a shadow fell across her workspace. Vice President Wei, his smile oily and insincere, loomed over her. "Miss Su," he began, his voice a low purr that set her teeth on edge, "a word in my office, please." Her heart hammered against her ribs. What now? She thought, a knot tightening in her stomach. She could feel the eyes of the entire department on her, curious, speculative, envious. Just another pawn in their game, a bitter voice whispered in her mind. Inside Wei's office, the air was thick with the cloying scent of expensive cologne. He closed the door behind her, the click echoing in the sudden silence. "I've been reviewing your performance, Miss Su," he said, his gaze lingering a little too long on her stomach. A wave of nausea washed over her. "And frankly, it's unsatisfactory." He leaned back in his leather chair, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "However," he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I believe in second chances. I can help you, Miss Su. I can make sure your situation doesn't affect your future here." The unspoken proposition hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Su Yuemeng's breath hitched. She understood, with chilling clarity, what he was implying. Rage, hot and fierce, coursed through her veins. "He harassed me," she blurted out, the words raw and trembling. "Mr. Gu recruited," the sentence died on her lips. Mentioning her husband, even in this context, felt dangerous, a betrayal of the fragile pact they had made. Wei's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. "Misunderstanding, misunderstanding," he said dismissively, waving a hand as if brushing away a fly. "These things happen. But I'm a reasonable man. Reconsider my offer, Miss Su. It would be a shame to see your potential wasted." Before she could respond, the office door swung open, revealing Mr. Gu, his face impassive, his eyes like chips of ice. The air in the room crackled with sudden tension. Wei's face paled. "Mr. Gu," he stammered, his carefully constructed composure crumbling. Mr. Gu's gaze swept over the room, settling on Su Yuemeng. For a fleeting moment, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes: concern. Recognition. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Fire her," he said, his voice cold and sharp, addressing Wei. Su Yuemeng's breath caught in her throat. Fire her. Her mind reeled. Had she miscalculated? Had her attempt to defend herself backfired? The blood drained from her face, leaving her feeling cold and hollow. Wei visibly relaxed, a smug smile spreading across his face. "Of course, Mr. Gu. I was just counseling her on her performance. Clearly, she's not suited for this environment." He turned to Su Yuemeng, his eyes glinting with malicious triumph. "You're dismissed, Miss Su. Security will escort you out." Su Yuemeng's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. She opened her mouth to speak, to explain, but the words caught in her throat. What could she say? That she was his wife? That this whole situation was a cruel, twisted farce? Mr. Gu's voice cut through the tense silence, sharp and decisive. "Not her, Wei. You're fired." He turned his gaze back to Su Yuemeng, his expression softening ever so slightly. "Ms. Su, please come with me." He turned and walked out of the office, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Su Yuemeng stood frozen for a moment, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The sudden shift, the unexpected turn of events, left her reeling. She glanced at Wei, his face ashen, his jaw slack with disbelief. A small, bitter smile touched her lips. Then, she followed Mr. Gu, her heart pounding a chaotic rhythm against her ribs. As she walked down the hushed corridor, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, the first ripple in a wave that was about to crash over Gu Corporation, changing everything. She caught a glimpse of herself in the polished glass wall of the hallway, a young woman, pregnant, and undeniably vulnerable, yet with a newfound steel in her eyes. He protected me, she thought, a strange warmth blooming in her chest. He actually protected me. The whispers followed her, now tinged with confusion and awe. She was no longer just an intern, a pregnant rumor. She was something more, something different. And in the depths of her uncertain future, a flicker of hope began to burn. The fluorescent lights of Gu Corporation hummed, a sterile counterpoint to the storm brewing in Su Yuemeng's chest. Director Ma's words, sharp as shards of glass, still echoed in her ears. Su Yuemeng, you are fired. Fired. The word landed like a physical blow, leaving her breathless. Her hand instinctively went to her abdomen, a protective gesture for the life growing within. A wave of nausea washed over her, not entirely from the morning sickness. How could this be happening? She hadn't even had a chance to explain, to defend herself against the venomous accusations of using her supposed affair with Mr. Gu to climb the corporate ladder. Director Ma's triumphant smirk burned itself into Yuemeng's memory. She thinks she's won, Yuemeng thought bitterly, the anger a fiery counterpoint to the icy fear that threatened to consume her. She thinks I'm some scheming little. The thought trailed off, incomplete. Even in her anger, Yuemeng couldn't bring herself to fully embrace the role of a ruthless manipulator. It simply wasn't her. She gathered her meager belongings, the few personal items scattered on her desk seeming pathetically insignificant now. A small framed photo of her grandmother, the only family she had left, caught her eye. A pang of guilt pierced through her turmoil. Grandmother had always worried about her precarious position in the world. This news would devastate her. Yuemeng closed her eyes, the image of her grandmother's kind, wrinkled face swimming behind her eyelids. I have to be strong, she told herself, the words a fragile shield against the rising tide of despair. For the baby. For grandmother. As she stepped out of the sterile office environment and into the bustling city streets, the midday sun felt oppressive, the noise of traffic grating on her already frayed nerves. She found herself drawn to a small, unassuming restaurant, the aroma of simmering broth and freshly steamed dumplings a faint beacon in the fog of her distress. She ordered a simple meal, the familiar comfort of the food a small solace. As she ate, she replayed the events of the morning, dissecting every word, every glance, every nuance of Director Ma's calculated attack. Why? She wondered, the question a relentless drumbeat in her mind. Why is she so determined to destroy me? The answer, when it came, was as cold and unsettling as a draft in an empty room. Jealousy. Power. Director Ma craved both, and Yuemeng, in her naivete, had inadvertently become a pawn in her game. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. That evening, a sleek black car pulled up outside the restaurant. The window rolled down, revealing the impassive face of Mr. Gu's assistant. Mr. Gu requests your presence, he said, his voice devoid of inflection. Yuemeng hesitated, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. She had avoided him all day, the misunderstanding about her pregnancy a chasm between them. But now, facing the prospect of unemployment and the looming shadow of Director Ma's malice, she had no choice. The car glided silently through the city streets, depositing her at the imposing entrance of the Gu Corporation headquarters. The building, a towering monolith of glass and steel, seemed to exude an aura of power and secrecy. As she stepped into the opulent lobby, the air crackled with tension. Whispers followed her like shadows, the curious glances of the employees a tangible weight on her shoulders. Mr. Gu was waiting for her in his office, his face etched with a severity she had never seen before. My wife is giving birth, he announced, his voice low and resonant. Yu Emeng's mind reeled. Wife? Giving birth? The word seemed to hang in the air, suspended in disbelief. Before she could process the implications, the office door burst open, revealing a frantic Vice President Wei. Mr. Gu, this is not what I want to do. I was just trying to help with the Yu Emeng situation. I didn't want, he trailed off, his words dissolving into a stammering mess. This is your design, Mr. Gu gestured towards a portfolio lying open on his desk, it's not me. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. Vice President Wei, in his misguided attempt to help, had further fueled the rumors about her and Mr. Gu, leading to Director Ma's drastic action. The realization hit Yu Emeng with the force of a physical blow. She looked at Mr. Gu, her heart pounding against her ribs. He met her gaze, his eyes filled with a depth of emotion she had never glimpsed before. In that moment, the carefully constructed walls around his heart seemed to crumble. Suddenly, the door opened again, and a distinguished older gentleman entered, his presence radiating an aura of quiet authority. Mr. Gu, he said, his voice carrying the weight of years and experience, you said Su Yu Emeng is your granddaughter. It was Mr. Zhou, a retired leader whose influence stretched far beyond the confines of the Gu Corporation. Yu Emeng stared at him, her mind struggling to reconcile the familiar face with the unfamiliar title. Grandfather? The word resonated deep within her, a forgotten echo of a past she barely remembered. Mr. Gu turned to her, his expression softening. He took her hand, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her chilled veins. Yu Emeng, he said, his voice gentle now, laced with a tenderness she had never heard before, it's time everyone knew the truth. He then turned to Mr. Zhou and Vice President Wei, this is my wife, Su Yu Emeng. And the child she carries is my heir. The fluorescent lights of Gu Corporation hummed, casting a sterile glow on the deserted office floor. Night had fallen, draping the city in a velvet cloak punctuated by distant, glittering lights. Su Yu Emeng sat alone in her small cubicle, the silence amplifying the frantic drumbeat of her heart. Director Ma's words, sharp as shards of glass, echoed in her ears, Su Yu Emeng, you are fired. The injustice of it all pressed down on her, a suffocating weight on her chest. She absently rubbed her swollen belly, a small, comforting warmth amidst the chilling uncertainty. How could things have spiraled so out of control? A simple misunderstanding, a whispered rumor, had transformed her from a diligent intern into the object of office gossip and scorn. She hadn't even had the chance to explain, to tell them the truth about her husband. A knock on the door startled her. It was Mr. Zhou, his face etched with lines of concern. He gestured for her to follow him, his silence more unnerving than any reprimand. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Was this it? The final, official dismissal. She walked behind him, each step heavy with dread, the polished floor reflecting her pale, anxious face. They entered the grand conference room, the very room where she had faced the accusing glares of Director Ma and the oily insinuations of Vice President Wei. The air still seemed thick with their disapproval. Mr. Gu sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable, a fortress of composure. Beside him sat Director Ma, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. Vice President Wei fidgeted nervously, his gaze darting between Mr. Gu and Mr. Zhou. Mr. Zhou cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the tense silence. Mr. Gu, he began, his voice firm despite his age, you said Su Yu Emeng was involved with Vice President Wei. Su Yu Emeng's breath hitched. She had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. Gu Jingxing's gaze shifted to her, a flicker of something unidentifiable in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but Mr. Zhou raised a hand, stopping him. Before you answer, there's something you should know. He turned to Su Yu Emeng, his eyes softening with an almost imperceptible warmth. Yu Emeng, he said, his voice thick with emotion, tell Mr. Gu who you are. A wave of dizziness washed over her. She clutched the back of a chair, her knuckles white. This was it. The moment of truth. She stammered, her throat tight with unshed tears. How could she say it? How could she reveal the secret she had guarded so fiercely? She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, I am Su Yuemeng, your wife. The silence that followed was deafening. Director Ma's smirk faltered, replaced by an expression of stunned disbelief. Vice President Wei paled, his eyes widening in terror. Gu Jingxing remained motionless, his face an impenetrable mask. Su Yuemeng risked a glance at him, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and controlled. Mr. Zhou, you said Su Yuemeng is your granddaughter? Mr. Zhou nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. Indeed. And the wife of Gu Jingxing, CEO of Gu Corporation. He turned to Director Ma and Vice President Wei, his gaze sharp and unforgiving. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. The events that followed unfolded with a dizzying speed. Director Ma's carefully constructed facade crumbled, her protests weak and unconvincing. Vice President Wei's attempts to defend himself were met with stony silence. Gu Jingxing, once a distant, enigmatic figure, now stood beside her, his hand firmly clasped around hers. Get him on board, he instructed, his voice cold and hard, glancing toward a security guard who promptly escorted the trembling Vice President Wei out of the room. Su Yuemeng watched, her mind struggling to process the rapid shift in power dynamics. Just moments ago, she had been a disgraced intern, facing dismissal. Now, she stood beside the CEO, her husband, her identity finally revealed, her position secure. Director Ma's face was a mask of fury and humiliation. This isn't over, she hissed, her eyes burning with resentment before she stormed out of the room, her heels clicking angrily against the polished floor. Su Yuemeng watched her go, a strange sense of pity mingling with relief. She had never wished harm on Director Ma, only fairness. The tension in the room slowly dissipated. Mr. Zhou approached her, his eyes twinkling. I apologize for the unconventional introduction, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. I wanted to see how things would play out. Su Yuemeng managed a weak smile. It was dramatic, she admitted, her voice still trembling slightly. Gu Jingxing turned to her, his expression softening. Su Yuemeng, he said, his voice low and gentle, I'm sorry. The apology, unexpected and sincere, caught her off guard. I accept your apology, she replied, her heart swelling with a complex mix of emotions. Relief, gratitude, and a burgeoning love she had kept hidden for so long. He took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. Let's go home, he said, his gaze locking with hers, a silent promise in his eyes. As they walked out of the conference room, hand in hand, Su Yuemeng felt a sense of peace settle over her. The night, once filled with uncertainty and fear, now held the promise of a new beginning. The truth had prevailed, and the future, once shrouded in shadows, now stretched before them, bright and full of hope. The hum of the fluorescent light seemed to fade as they stepped into the elevator, the silence now a comfortable blanket, enveloping them in a shared sense of understanding. The city lights outside twinkled, reflecting in Gu Jingxing's eyes, a silent testament to the love that had weathered the storm and emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. The ordeal at Gu Corporation had been a trial by fire, but it had also forged a stronger bond between them, a bond that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead.